Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Streamed live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation, and I'm joined this morning with my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, E.
Good morning, Tommy Lewis, man. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, nothing much. Hey, look at this cat, man. Already.
Every once in a while, man, somebody, the early bird gets the worm.
Let's go.
Ken Wilson, man, come on, start us off, man. What's going on? Absolutely, man. It is a great morning. Tommy, how was your week, man? What happened positive this week that you want to just share with folks?
Eric, it was a good week this week.
Okay.
I have to shout out one of our clients, Middletown School District here in Southwest Ohio, for those who are not familiar. We've started year one of a 3-year partnership in systemic equity.
Okay.
Right. And so they have a very high percentage of citizens, not just students, but citizens who are unfortunately battling poverty.
Okay.
And so that's a real reality. Right. And I'll tell you right now, Eric, I don't care what people say, that this work of equity is to raise the tide for everyone.
Come on, say that again, Tommy.
So, this work,
again, man.
This work is to raise the tide for everyone.
Right.
And so we learned last year with this client and other school districts that during COVID and maybe the year before, that all of our students did not have the same access to technology.
Right.
They were not living in the same environments that were supportive of their learning process once they returned home.
Come on now.
Right? All kinds of factors, E. And so what we were able to do, we were able to work with the high school, the middle school, and then they have a 6th grade center, right? This is kind of the in-between the elementary and the middle school. There's just a 6th grade.
Right.
And so we were able to work with those staff, a total of about 250 staff, walk through about 2 hours of interactive, reflective, and kind of a workshop session.
Right.
Was able to uncover a lot of nuances around education, particularly to Middletown, and identify some solutions.
Okay.
Right? And so that's why I was so happy, because some people think that we come together and we point the finger, this is what you're doing wrong.
Right.
That's not the case at all.
No.
We ask, what are the opportunities? And these folks jumped in feet first and create a big splash of success. We had a great time with Middletown City Schools. Go Middies. Go Middies.
Excellent. Tommy, I'm always glad to hear that, man. So glad to hear every client that you're working with. I know how deeply you care about them, man, how hard you prepare for them, how much you love the people that you're serving. And so I really enjoy hearing those stories. Had a great week this week myself, working with a new client, technology organization, global organization. Had a chance to do some training with the CEO and her direct reports. And I'll tell you, Tommy, when you have people come in and they lay out as their expectations that they want to have an uncomfortable, honest conversation, you're in for something, man. And so they came prepared to do their work. And that's not something that I look to deliver is an uncomfortable conversation. But I love it when people say, I need to be a bit uncomfortable to go to where I'm trying to go to. And so I was grateful, man, that these executives didn't just say that, but they really took chances and they got to know each other in profound ways. and the CEO said, "Hey, we're on the cusp of something. Is there anything that you can do to just allow me to hear some feedback from some of my leaders?" And we created a fishbowl and had leaders in the circle. And Tommy, I started off by apologizing to the CEO. I mentioned this to you before the show. Sometimes, Tommy, I think it's important for people to understand that you and I don't always get it right.
Right.
And I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago, and it was on a Friday. I had gone through a long week, and I was meeting with this leader, man, and I wasn't listening as well as I'd like to. I was disappointed with myself afterwards. I didn't need anybody to tell me that. I graded myself C minus. I said, Eric, that was not your best moments. And so I started the conversation by apologizing, and her eyes just really got like, what? I mean, it's kind of surprised.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, Tommy, I think that apologizing and walking with humility is what keeps our feet on the ground, man. It keeps us growing. I've certainly discovered that a lot of my own family over the 32 years that I've been married. I got a lot of practice at apologizing. With my children, I get a lot of practice with apologizing. I don't love that, but I know that it's necessary. And then what I saw happen afterwards, man, the kind of transparency that people brought around some of their own challenges. We're going to talk about those kind of things and having empathy for that a little later. So I would say that that's an opportunity for me, man. It was that was a growth opportunity this week. The response, the evaluations was off the chart positive. People felt like they got a lot out of each other and their interactions with each other, and they learned some things from me, and I learned some things and grew as well. So,
yeah, and I appreciate you sharing, Eric, and for our audience, our community, for those who are listening and chimed in now, and those who are going to watch this later, I'll share with Eric Ellis, my brother, that what he does in this humility, in this self-reflection, in this apology, that was not something that Eric Ellis does to get a reaction.
Right.
That is something that Eric Ellis does for self-improvement, to be able to provide and contribute more benefit to other people.
Right.
So I've known Eric to take on a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, so that he can be vulnerable and humble to help others along the journey. So it wasn't saying, I'm sorry, for folks to say, yes, thank you for saying I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry because I'm reflective, and it was a C minus, right? And I'm aiming to bring my whole self and my best self
Come on,
interaction, right? And I didn't do that.
That's right.
So now I know that other leaders who are looking and experiencing a leader, Eric, they're saying, well, I don't know if I was always on my A game.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is that we're not.
We're not, Tommy.
We're not.
Tommy, I love to hear that, man, because that's a bit of a theme for me. It is the theme that I carry into the work that you and I do. I think that this humility that you've carved out, it's such an important part of the conversation. And whenever we get to the place that we're no longer humble, meaning we don't see ourselves as in need of improvement in work, I think we disqualify ourselves as leaders. And in this work, we disqualify ourselves as facilitators of this conversation. And I think that's the thing that throws people the most, is when you think that the problem doesn't lie in you, that all the problems lie outside of you and with other folks. When you get the kind of indignation that allows you to sort of take a finger and start pointing it at others and never take a look at yourself, Tommy, I think you disqualify yourself in this conversation. That's part of what makes people so defensive, is when we're literally simply trying to point at them. I think the older I get, Tommy, I'm recognizing that it's not my job to fix people. It's my job to try to model the best behavior I can. And then let's have a conversation and see what we learn from it.
Yeah.
but it's not my job to fix people. I want to do the best I can to try to be the best role model. And some days I get that right, and other days I miss the target. Either way provides opportunities for growth.
Yeah, Eric, I'm finding that even in our community, that we're surrounding ourselves with folks who are on that same journey, right? I can think about, Ken Wilson and Brother Reggie Crane and Terry Cooley and many others in our community that, we have from Ken Wilson, that sense of humor, incredibly intelligent.
Right.
Incredibly intelligent. Reggie Crane, who has a breadth and depth of experience and knowledge, and incredibly humble.
Right.
Terry Cooley, who has that bombastic personality. He's a presence of a man. Right. Sense of humor, intelligence, right, and a little brawn. Right.
Whenever necessary,
whenever necessary. But still always reflective, always growing, always growing, always growing. And I think that that's one of the core themes, is not for today, maybe for later weeks, that are we consistently growing, right? Woo. Are we consistently growing? And that can be in different areas of our life.
Right.
So I think we're going to talk about a little bit. We're going to kind of bounce around and give folks a potpourri of conversation today, which is good.
Right.
But are we growing, even, Eric, when that growth may feel uncomfortable in that moment?
It often feels uncomfortable. So let's start, Tommy. I was really, as I was reflecting on what we were going to talk about today, empathy will be the banner that some of this will come under. But we'll start with taking a look at challenges that groups face and the potential role empathy can play in solving some of these challenges. So let me start with this one, Tommy. So this week, we've heard a lot. First of all, let's take a moment to honor Dr. Colin Powell, Secretary Colin Powell, General, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, for the life that he lived in front of us. I don't know if you had a chance to see any part of the funeral, but it was just amazing, man. It was powerful. His children spoke, teary-eyed. The man that we saw and revered and honored was the man that they called father. And when children can say, I love that man, that's who that man really was. We didn't see all of who he was. His wife loved him to death, loved him enough to say, do not run for president. And then Whitley Phipps sang, great is thy faithfulness, man. Oh, man. I mean, if you could ever get ushered into heaven, you want that to be on The Voice of Whitley Phipps, man. And he just brought to life how the faithfulness of God, and it allows us. We gained hope from the singing of that song at that funeral in reflection of the life of General Colin Powell. And so I just wanted to take a moment, man, to just mention that. I know Kendall Wright, that's probably a soft spot in him, as it is in all of us. So any thoughts that you want to share about Colin Powell before I move on to challenges?
Yeah, just say again, good morning to the community, Kendall and Ty, et cetera. But I had always appreciated and respected Colin Powell. Obviously, I didn't know him. But I, to be honest, Eric, I had always felt him when he spoke.
Woo.
I did, beyond just him being a military man, et cetera.
Yes,
I just, there was something about him and his cadence and his resonance that resonated with me.
Right.
And there are a number of people that happens to.
Right.
And he will be missed, and I think in so many different ways, other than his leadership in the military and the government.
Right.
Like you said, with his family, with his friends, with the folks like me who he never met, that he put a deposit of hope, if you will, in lives of so many people.
Tommy, could you say for me, if you have a chance to be in the picture frame? We need to hear you say that. That's your thing. Because I think about sort of peering in the picture frame of his life. Please say that for me, just so I can hear you. I love that. I think about that every once in a while. Tommy Lewis will say, "I'm in the picture frame."
In the picture frame, man. That's how I've grown my business. To be honest, before Eric, real quick, just to deter where it comes from.
Right.
So I had learned in my style of selling, which is not hard selling at all.
Right. Exactly.
There's 3 different types of fishing in selling, and where it led to that picture frame analogy. Right. So one way of fishing is fly fishing. Fly fishing, you have to be in the stream and you wade in the water where the fish come by, and you have to have some patience, and you throw your line in, and hopefully you can get a bite.
Right.
And then there's angler fishing. You can be on the shore, on the bank, and throw your line in and where the fish are, and you can catch some fish.
Okay.
Right? And then there's harpoon fishing.
Okay.
And you just really take your harpoon and stab that opportunity.
Okay.
Right? I used to use that analogy, and then I learned that, those were sometimes styles of sales, styles of getting opportunities that were not matched with my personality. My personality is that I just want to be in the picture frame. So anytime something's happening, I'm like, where's Waldo?
Right.
Just in the frame, right? Looking away, right? Holding the umbrella over here, right?
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you.
Every photo, every picture,
right?
It could be, it could be, Timbuktu. It could be Mao Zedong, right? It could be the president of the United States.
Right.
Here's the common denominator. What the hell? Is that Tommy Lewis?
I love that, man. I needed to hear it. I needed to have that explanation, man.
Yeah.
That brings joy to my morning like you'll never know, man. Thank you. I love that. And so we are prepared this morning, community. I hope y'all came ready to do y'all work.
Let's go.
Y'all ain't been working that hard over here. We've been looking for the deep comments. Don't get them.
Yep.
But I'm going to start us off with the challenges, Tommy, that we're seeing. And I'm wondering how we find ourselves in what seem like easy wins. How do we keep sort of dragging out defeat out the jaws of victory? And so if you look at it on a political side, I'm not a Democrat, not a Republican. I'm sort of moderate. I just, vote my conscience, man. Whoever feels like they're going to try to do something, which keeps me on the sidelines a lot. But we've looked at then over this last week, the economy's getting better. But we're watching the Democrats not be able to come to any kind of agreement to get any bills passed. We got the infrastructure bill. We have the Build Back Better, whatever's in it, for the people bill. Neither of them able to get across the finish line. Tommy, what is this that we're seeing? Is it leadership or is it selfishness? What?
That's good, Eric. I wasn't anticipating that one. Is it leadership or is it selfishness?
All right.
I think in true negotiation style and format, there has to be some sense of selfishness, where otherwise you would gift it away, you would give it away, you would not try to negotiate. Okay. Negotiation is to try to find a common ground, a common landing point. However, you want that common landing point to lean more toward your favor.
Okay.
Right? And so in politics, what I'm saying is that I'm observing individuals, regardless of political connections and political views, that they are not always looking at the long term of decisions.
Right.
Short term, maybe 10 years, believe it or not.
Right.
10 years. because I have about 10 more years before I need to retire.
Right.
So I can look as far as my retirement date. And then I work backwards, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then I get down to 1 week. What do I need today?
Right.
So what that does is that limits a person's vision to negotiate.
Mm.
And so I think that
Wow.
we have different people being influenced by different voices that are informing their decisions to push hard in the negotiation, fall back in the negotiation, or even acquiesce in the negotiation. In other words, I'm in the negotiation, but really you don't know that I'm not.
Right.
I'm in this party, right? I've said we need to do this. That was 6 months ago or a year ago, but really I never thought we should. And
Right.
now I have the power in the negotiation to speak up. That's what I think what happens. So I would say that it leans in the majority toward that selfishness,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And less toward the community or the job of the servant leader.
Mm. Brinksmanship gone rogue.
Yes, sir.
And I think that in many ways, people looked at Joe Manchin and politicians saw, oh my, look at all the notoriety he's getting by just standing his ground and going the opposite way. Oh my goodness, nobody knows I exist.
Right.
So I've got to oppose something.
Yep.
Huh?
Yep.
And the thing is, and so it's not enough that Democrats and Republicans don't think they have to work together at all. Now within our party, we just gonna let the whole thing crash and burn so that you can get your 15 minutes of fame. And so there's a part of me, Tommy, that looks at that and I get concerned about our future, the future of our leadership. And we're seeing moderates just quitting. Tommy, why is that the response? If we look at the Republican side and see some of those that are moderates, instead of choosing to stay and fight, they just throwing up their hands, man, and saying, I'm out of here. I'm not running anymore.
Full transparency, Eric. I don't know. I don't know really. I'm still trying to wrap my arms around certain terms and concepts and ideologies,
Right.
which sometimes is changing to me. It gets a little bit confusing. And so not only, are you asking the question around, how some of the moderates kind of, stop out, drop out. But I don't know if collectively, if we always are together on the concept or the ideology,
Right.
of whatever our view is.
Yeah.
And so it may allude to, right, Dr. Wright's question, around, is there a difference between protecting self-interest and selfishness? I don't think there's a difference. That's my view. Self-interest is selfishness.
Okay.
I think. Now, some may think that selfishness is the individual, right? So if I'm an individual who is a moderate, then I can, stop out or drop out because I personally don't want to do it.
Right.
But protecting self-interest may be collective or a vast majority.
Okay.
So if the vast majority, 60% of the moderates are saying, hey, we need to stop out, we need to drop out, we don't need to add value here. The 40% who are like moderates, let's do it, they're kind of, shouted down.
Right.
And so those on the outside look at the moderates as a whole and see that the 60% have, ruled the day. Then it's like, oh, the moderates are not saying anything.
Right.
And so it gets a little convoluted in my idea.
Right. And I would say that for me, that people have, to some extent, all people are interested in their self-interest, and they seek to try to do things that are consistent or in line with their self-interest. For me, selfishness goes beyond your self-interest.
Okay.
It means once I have taken care of my food, water, shelter, the things that I actually need to survive, now I'm going to take extra, even though I know it's pulling away from you and your ability to survive. And so there's a selfishness that says, I don't want to let any resources out.
Come on now.
I think that that's a character issue that that can be problematic, and I think that's what we're seeing now. We're not seeing people just line up with their self-interest or the interest of their community, but beyond that, now I'm just looking for a personal win. I'm looking for more attention for me. I'm looking for a bigger megaphone so that I can get more power personally. And almost to hell with the rest, to hell with the good of the whole or any of that, man. And that's unfortunately, I think, where too often we're beginning to go, man.
Eric, you're making a good point for me. Love to hear from the community as well.
Yeah.
That you're making a good point, because as I'm listening to your explanation, I'll be honest, I connected it to our political conversation right now. I connected it to the social conversation that we've been having on different topics. I connected it to just that quickly to some of my corporate partners that we're working with.
Right.
And your comments around defining protecting self-interest versus selfishness really connected the dots to me in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that explanation. That was good.
Right. Let's move to the battle that's happening around education. So to stay with the theme of politics, I'm not really big on it, but you hear it here lately. So the Democrats lost the governorship in Virginia, and I listened to the Republican candidate, and it sounded like he was able to walk the line of, I'm going to do away with critical race theory. So he was able to throw that away for the Trump voters. But then he said on the other side, but I'm going to stand for history and true and honest history. And so what he was saying to the independents is that I'm not a person that's going to whitewash history so that, that we don't tell any truths. So he walked that line. But my question to you, Tommy, is where in the world, how do we get to critical race theory?
Mm-hmm.
Most people that are opposing it have no idea what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I am finding that that all communities have a degree of selfishness and ethnocentric worldview. And I just saw this man in person that asked to speak to me after one of the speeches, conferences I gave, wanted to link up with me. And then he was saying that, white people are innately worse than others. And so shouldn't they have a higher dose of unconscious bias training? I said, well, hold on, bro. Hey. What? But that's where people are, man. What's happening with us, Tommy, and our just checking our brain and then just at war over what our kids are going to learn? Help me to understand what, and I'm saying that all of this is under the banner of empathy. So let's talk about it, but then we're going to go to trying to define what empathy is, because I think that we're lacking that more and more. We're lacking empathy for one another, and that's a big part of our greatest challenge.
So critical race theory is basically a concept that was started 40 plus years ago in higher education, most particularly in law schools, to take a look at the social constructs, social behaviors, historical biography, looking at the past simply through the lens of race, not through the lens of gender, not through the lens of ethnicity, not through the lens of religion, not through the lens of politics, but through the lens of race. Mm-hmm. And so here in America, we actually categorize people into groups of races.
Right.
In fact, when we complete formal documentation with the federal government, we have opportunities to check particular boxes. And so this theory was to analyze that phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to 2020, 2021. It's a reaction to research and a real reality from 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The research on the browning of America.
Yeah. Oh,
And the
yeah.
browning of America said that the majority population, which were Caucasian, white, they were at a particular high percentage, and there was an increasing number of people of color. They weren't called people of color at the time, right? They were
Right.
basically called Hispanics, right? Most particularly Mexicans. At the same time, there were other ethnic groups and racial groups coming from across the world into America, which was combining into this browning of America.
Mm-hmm.
Now in 2020, 2021, when we take a look at the efforts of equity, because there's a lot of disparity in
Right.
our educational system, in our communities, such as
Right.
poverty, class, such as even the fallout from the COVID pandemic and our students leaving the brick and mortar, the classroom, and going into this virtual learning.
Right.
Our educators were struggling here. And
Right.
secondly, Eric, not only that, our parents, and when I say our parents, I'm talking about across the country,
Right.
our parents were literally able to see and experience the curriculum that our teachers were teaching.
Ooh.
You have to
Good
think
point.
about it. In the past, they weren't.
Right.
Teachers,
Right.
parents were not as involved that they would
Right.
go to school every day.
Just send the kid to school.
Yep. So now, where are we?
Wow.
We're at a place where, as Mao Zedong says, a smattering of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Okay.
A smattering.
Right.
And so what does that mean?
Right.
There's a movement on ignorance.
Mm.
I don't have to have a lot of knowledge. I only have to have a smattering, just a little
Right.
bit.
Right.
And I use that little knowledge coupled with volume.
Right.
Right? If more people say, I don't like this, I don't know what it is, but I don't like it, I've never studied it, I don't like this, and I don't even consider myself the race that the critical theory is analyzing.
Right.
So when I think of critical race theory, its race is Black, Hispanic, and other.
Right.
Because I'm a majority, which
Right.
is privilege, which can tie into some form of white supremacy, and to indoctrinate this into a movement and a campaign to say we need to revisit everything that has anything to do with others and literally eliminate it,
Right.
critique it,
Right.
just complain about it.
Right.
However, we're going to keep the quote unquote true history, which is code speak for our history, white
Right.
majority dominant culture.
Right.
So I've been putting a lot of thought in this, and I've obviously, Eric, I've had to put a lot of thought in this because we've been working with school districts for the last 10 years, and some of the school districts we've been working with across this country for the last 10 years, doing the same training, right, year in and year out, with a tweak here and there. We have moved away, or the districts, 4 districts have moved away from us to say what we've been doing for the last 8 years, right, is not going to work because equity equals critical race theory.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Right. Thoughtless, because you can use the word race and set people off.
Yep.
And so you use the word race and it sets people off. I don't need to hear anything else. That you're educating my kids about race.
Yep.
And so now, should parents be concerned and interested in what's happening in schools? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But we should have, but I'll tell you, I think that there is sort of a diversity war that's being waged. That in many senses, sort of blue collar, especially blue collar white people, are feeling as though the Democrat elite, the progressives, are looking down their noses at them and saying, I know best what your kid needs to learn and understand. And so there is a battle that's going on, because I think that because there are human beings on all sides, that oftentimes people are pushing their self-interest in selfish ways, getting back to that. And so that's part of what the war is being fought over, is me being concerned about yours and not trusting you, and certainly you being concerned about my motivations and not trusting me. And I think that in many ways, Tommy, this real boil back to having a lack of empathy. So let me just define that for people, sort of what is empathy, and then how do we apply it to our daily experiences. Empathy is the ability to perceive or relate to the thoughts, emotions, or experiences of others. And I would say that this is a lot of what you and I teach on, Tommy. We teach things like empathic listening. So if you want to be able, so I believe personally that empathy is at the heart of community and relational success. In other words, it's very difficult to have a successful relationship without having empathy. And I think that as we're going through COVID-19, as we're going through all these pandemics, without empathy, Tommy, you can't get there. That's a desire, a willingness to be curious about others and to seek to understand their perspective and point of view. Why is that difficult so often, Tommy, in the work that we do? Why are we seeing that as something that's so difficult?
It's difficult, Eric, I think for just two reasons. There are more, but for two reasons. That one, to really have empathy, you have to be vulnerable to recognizing what you don't really know, and sometimes what you have not and may never experience. You have to be vulnerable for that. And that vulnerability could lead to additional questions that you don't have answers to, right? And the other, and I'm going to share.
Hold up, Brian. Hold up, Brian. Say that again. My goodness. Say that again.
So here's the example with this. There are 10 men, physicians, who come together for a conclave. And these 10 men, PhDs, a couple of them have their Jewish doctrines, they're attorneys, and a couple of them are MDs, they're medical doctors.
Okay.
Highly skilled, highly educated, they're seasoned. So all of them are over 40 years old. They're not 19, they're not 17 or 12. They've come together to really have this conclave, this think tank around the experience of birthing children. Mm-hmm. And so they are really thinking about and kind of brainstorming what their experiences are with birthing children. And they talk about the levels of pain, right? They talk about the 7, in some cases, the 8 or 9 months or 9+ months in some cases that they bore children. They talk about kind of the process to get a prenatal care, mm-hmm. right? And they produce volumes of books and white papers and research, right? That's what these men did. And then a woman shows up, scratches her head and says, have any of you ever had a child come out of your body? And the men said, no, we've none of us.
Right.
And she says, first of all, how do you know how painful it really is if only men have been talking about it?
Right.
In that regard, the men may want to have the willingness, right, to empathize, mm-hmm. right, the will. But in true reality, they do not want to feel vulnerable of not knowing what they don't know. They really, as a man, you don't know what it is to birth a child.
No clue.
So with empathy, one has to be vulnerable to recognize that they don't know something. You have to be willing to do that. And the other is that you have to have the ability not to necessarily walk in that person's shoes, but the ability to accept their lived experiences.
Wow.
And that's where people get hung up on true empathy. Yeah, I have the willingness, right, to to listen to you, to hear about it, right, and to include you in the discussion, maybe even the policy making, all that good stuff.
Right.
But in reality, I don't have the ability to accept your difference. Right.
So
that's where it comes up.
Let's look at that. So in birth, men not being able to empathize with women in some cultures, they will take a man up over the woman while she's sort of in labor, and they'll tie to his private area a big bag of rocks and boulders on a string, and just get to yank down on that while she's feeling, so you can empathize with her going through that experience. I don't think I want to empathize in that way, Tommy. But in this culture, sometimes they will put sort of weighted stomachs on men that you carry around for a week and see how you do. But I would say none of that can give you a full experience. Tommy, let's practice something.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that empathy often starts with listening in empathic ways. So what I'd like us to do is just demonstrate what that might look like. And so I'd like you to share with me. I'm Tommy Lewis, the facilitator. You're a participant in a school that might be challenging me or pushing back around the value of this course. And just give me a sentence or two of what things you've heard. And after you just coming to me as a participant.
Eric, I do appreciate your class here, but I did have a concern. My concern is, oftentimes we talk about this subset of people. I'm calling it a subset. It's basically students who are not the majority, right? They're our Mexican students, our international students, our Black students, our poor students. That's not the main folks. Those are what we call the subset. And I'm concerned that we're placing too much emphasis on the subset of students rather than caring for the whole of all students. Can you help me with this?
Okay. First of all, thank you, participant Kane, for bringing this to me. Let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. It sounds like you're saying that oftentimes when we're having these conversations, we place too much emphasis or focus on sort of minority populations, students of color, and others, and we are neglecting in some ways the sort of the mainstream students, and you have some concern that this may be kind of missing the mark for a large majority of students. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, so let's break that down, slow that down for everybody. So what we do as we try to display empathy to someone, because see, the first thing that happens, Tommy, is when somebody brings that to us, our mind is going, ain't it?
Yes.
Our mind is thinking about them. Our mind is saying, here you go again, just another average teacher that's not doing her whole job. That's it. So our mind is going. And the thing is, first of all, you have to shut your mind down and you have to really focus on trying to hear what the person is saying. If I want to deliver empathy to them, I want to have the appropriate body language. So I don't want to do this. I don't want to, okay, come on. I don't want to do all that. I want to lean in. I want to nod my head. I want to smile if I can. I want to make sure that they understand that I'm interested in what they have to say. And then once they've stopped, then I want to begin with a tentative opening. Now, I started by thanking you for bringing that to me because I like to encourage people that it's okay to bring challenging questions to me. And then I want to start with a tentative opening. It says, let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. Step one. Step two, then I want to sort of paraphrase the content message And then the feeling content. So it's the message content, the feeling content, the ABCs of what you said, and then the feeling. And then I want to check for accuracy. Is that what you said? And then when you said, like you said, yep, then I can go to, how can I help? What is it that you'd like to hear from me? Well, maybe nothing. I just wanted to share that with you. Okay. Or I was hopeful. But I think that's the first thing that we have to understand, Tommy, in trying to display empathy toward others, that we want to have a sort of a strategy and some skills that we can work through in order to demonstrate that curiosity, that empathy toward others. What makes that difficult to do, Tommy? What do we gain if we employ that kind of technique?
What makes it difficult is our hidden, unconscious, or implicit bias. So that's what makes it difficult, Eric, because when we're listening to someone, oftentimes we, as you said, we have our view, we have our perspective, and we're many times, especially in discourse, civil discourse, we're looking for words or phrases that we can attach our argument to. Those are pieces of the whole thing.
Right.
So if we use the technique to objectively, as much as possible, listen to the entire sharing of information, repeat what we've heard for clarity.
Right.
We may, again, get a return back to say, no, that's not exactly what I said.
Right.
To get additional clarity.
Right.
Repeat that again.
Right.
So that I'm clear again, because we don't want to just get in and say, okay, I got it. All right.
Right.
So you said we don't need to talk about the minorities. No, that's not what I said.
Right.
Right. That's what you continue to hear.
Right. Excellent point.
So that's what we need to be aware of our own biases, be it negative or positive and all in between. We have to listen to the whole story as objective as we can. Don't jump to conclusions. Cover our hot button triggers, those things that people say or do that set us off,
right,
that have us lean toward our own value system, beliefs, and principles, or lean away from an argumentative perspective. And then I think also with empathy, when we're listening to someone's story, as you mentioned in defining empathy, it is their lived experience.
Love that.
And using the platinum rule, which is treat others as they would like to be treated.
Right.
When you listen and appreciate someone else's story as their story, you don't really get selfish about it. You don't get offended. Right. You don't get alarmed because it's not your story when you're really listening to someone else, right? And then it becomes inquisitive. Tell me more. Help me understand. You have additional questions. So when you say the subset of people, what are you? I haven't heard that phrase before.
Right. Right.
What is the set of people, and then what is the subset?
Right.
That's the same argument, Eric, that we used back in the day with the pushback on, well, that's reverse racism. And people used to have arguments about that all the time.
Right.
I used to ask, okay, that's reverse racism. First, what is racism? Right? And then define what's reverse racism from an empathetic perspective. Because if most people say that's reverse racism, that's when my majority does something against white folks.
Right.
So what's racism? Well, you know what it is. No. Got to continue to inquire objectively. And again, it's not to poke holes in the argument. It's to understand the context.
That's good, Tommy. And I'll tell you that is what's difficult for us.
Yeah.
Because the things that people say oftentimes trigger us. And I can tell you, so when we get triggered, now we're hijacked. We've already put the rest of the story together about who you are. And I think now we're going down a path of nothing but conflict and point, counterpoint.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing on a daily basis. And I would say that people of color oftentimes feel exhausted of trying to be empathic to other people's ignorance. But you and I find, I think, as leaders, that it's helpful for us on our good days when we can demonstrate that empathy. And I underscore on our good days, because if you catch us on a bad day, Tommy, and you say something crazy, you might get something crazy back. So let's see, what are other things that we can do to deliver more empathy to others? I'll start by saying being curious. Talk about that, Tommy, the importance of curiosity in conversations across people who see the world differently.
Curiosity begins with one's personality as well, Eric. Personality of continuous growth. We talked about that earlier. Those of us who are continuously growing, those of us who are different today than we were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we know we've grown in one way, shape, or form. We're not the same person today than we were 40 years ago. So what does that mean? That means if you've grown or we've grown over the last decades, there may be additional learning for us. And if it's selfish to help me and my family, then have a dialogue, to inquire, to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
What we find ourselves doing from an academic perspective, just logically, we fall into a dogma. And a dogma is a mentality or a mindset that is unwavering, unshifting, and it really is an anchor. It's called an anchor point. It's an anchor in one's identity. And so if that anchor point or principle is strong in one's identity, it is uncomfortable, if not downright, it's a panic if that anchor is uplifted. Right? It is.
Right.
In other words, all that I've learned my whole life is wrong. That's an upliftment of an anchor point. Right? Upliftment.
Right.
And so what we try to do is, we don't want to uplift anchors. We want to simply pursue through inquisition, through acquisition of knowledge, through appreciation, that we are not the only people on this earth experiencing the same things.
Mm-hmm.
To say, tell me your story.
Right.
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 Everyone
Right.
has a story. So
Right.
that's what that ideology of that acquisition, that inquisitiveness, that's what that is. It's around growth, Eric. And I'll share this very quickly, Eric. I'm glad we're talking about this. It just come to my spirit. For those who are familiar with my company, Make It Plain Consulting, you see a logo, which is a tree. And that tree comes from the thought I had when thinking of that. Basically, if that tree was kind of a small commercial, a caricature, it would be a young boy, a young girl in a silhouette walking up a hill with a stick and a bag on that stick, right? And they will walk up the hill toward the tree. And this is the tree of knowledge and wisdom.
Okay.
And they look up into the tree, and there are different fruits of that tree. And those fruits have question marks in them. And one of the fruits with the question mark falls from the tree. It hits the person on the head. And that person sits down back on the trunk of the tree, and that fruit opens up into a book, the book of knowledge.
Right.
Right. And so Make It Plain Consulting was derived from the acquisition of knowledge. Right. And then also, for those who are spiritual, if you will, there was a tree at the beginning.
Right.
And that tree had good and bad information.
Right.
God said, only eat from the good fruit. Although that same tree, Eric, had bad fruit. Right. Because if you eat from both, you are omnipresent, and you're held accountable.
Right.
So what I wanted to do is, and I continue to be active in acquiring knowledge and empathy, having conversations like this and with others, to build my own knowledge, and others' knowledge such that we're not wandering. Eric, we're not just walking to nowhere, that we're opening books, we're opening experiences, we're having conversations, diversity conversations, to ensure that the next generation may not have to have the conversation in as much a difficult way. It's more easy. It will be the conversation, but it's easier. I
That's
think
good,
that's
Tom.
been happening over the decades as well.
Right.
Do.
I love that, Tommy. Now, and let me just build on that. I would say that the reason why you and I are still here, when a lot of organizations that started off with us and before us are not here, and many that started after us, long time after us, are not here, is because we remain curious. In other words, if our business was only about sort of criticizing and seeking to hold the dominant culture accountable for all of the discrimination and diversity ills in the world, we would not be here. But you and I have chosen to not just teach, but to listen and to hear and to affirm people's realities when they pose them. When they said, Eric, I get the point, but it doesn't feel right to me if I'm the only one in the room that has to admit that they're biased. That just doesn't feel right. Do you agree? And I had to say, yes, I do agree. And so over these 30 years, I've not just taught the dominant culture, but I've learned from them and then incorporated those lessons into the way that I teach. And so that's what you and I are constantly trying to do, is trying to empathize with the student so that that which we deliver as a lesson is something that has a higher potential to be viewed as value added. And I think that too often, if anybody approaches life from only their vantage point, back to self-interest, and only trying to deliver a selfish message that seems like it only is benefiting us, then we should not expect, a world to be open to embrace that.
That's great. Yeah, Eric, that's it. That you hit on the head. Empathy, and you keep repeating it over and over and over again. And I agree with it, and I agree with repeating it. It is at the core of things to be able to empathize, right? And it's not just a word that we can throw out there and say, have empathy.
Right.
It's a skill.
Woo, and some work behind that.
And some work. And that is one of the reasons, Eric, I believe we are lacking in empathy, because of the work that's needed to achieve it.
Right.
The work that's needed to sustain empathy. In other words, if we're of a particular generation and we have empathy, right? We've developed strong empathy for others. That doesn't mean that our children and grandchildren will have the same empathy for those same people. It doesn't mean that, because that's why we have folks who are anti-critical race theory talking about, and these are folks in the community saying we need to address this education thing, right? Where it's never been taught in the schools that they're talking about removing it from. It's never been taught. But it's not the critical race theory that's really the point. Right. The point is we have volume in our voice, right? This is this is a movement around what we control, what we want to control, what we want to have as ours. This same argument is not at the higher education level, because the majority of the folks who are pushing this movement, right, are not even talking about higher education. They don't want to go there.
Right.
Yeah, they don't want to go there because
Right.
they may not have been there.
Right. Exactly.
Real talk.
So before we wrap up our weekly installment, I'm going to leave this with the community. Because the community, I don't want to leave you with thinking about the world, thinking about political discussions and debates, or what you're going to do when you get to work. I want to give you something that you can do right now today at home. That will be maybe one of the most important things you could ever do. And that is start with your family, start with your children, and start by asking some questions. What might I be missing as I seek to provide the best parenting to you? How am I misunderstanding you? To your significant other. Hey, baby, I just want to ask you, how am I missing you? Are there things that I need to better understand about you so that we can have greater harmony in our relationships? And then when they start talking, open your ears and start listening. And then utilize that skill that Tommy and I talked about around empathic listening. Start with a tentative opening and then paraphrase back the message content of what they've said and the feeling content, and then check back for accuracy to make sure that you got them. Because Tommy, I'm going to tell you, man, if we practice there, that's where we have the greatest work to do. If we build this skill up with the people that matter most to us, I think we can then utilize that skill as we're interacting with others in the world around us. And Tommy, I don't see us sustaining any losses from that. No. Only gains and benefits.
Only gains and benefits. That's it, E.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for engaging in another wonderful conversation. Community, we want to thank you for getting up early, starting with us right at the top of the day, of the morning. And Ken Wilson, we still got to get you on, man. I'm interested in making sure we get you on the show so that people can hear that brilliant mind of yours. But I want to say to our community, love each other, listen to each other, empathize with somebody, keep growing. Until we see you next week. Have a great week of diversity
conversations.
All right. Take care now.